Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
This is Kinda Murdery Insomniac. Stories to stay awake by. Good evening, Insomniacs, and welcome. I'm your host, Zevon Odelberg. Thank you for deciding to be here. Tonight is Thursday, November 11th, 2021. It's Veterans Day. And before we begin, I would like to take a moment to express my heartfelt thanks to the brave men and women who don our nation's uniform and devote their lives to service. We salute you, and you have our eternal gratitude. And now, forgive me, my fellow brethren of the bloodshot eye, as I segue from noble intent to violent purpose. As always, this is your last chance to exit stage left and return to a life of warmth and delusion. Still with us? Good. Then join me for tonight's edition of Kinda Murdery Insomniac. Stories to stay awake by. I discovered this story in the pages of the Weekly People's Cause, a newspaper out of Red Bluff, California, from the late 19th century until the middle teens of the 20th. On Saturday, January 18th, 1908, Edward Vaughn visited the cabin of Joseph Bebeau and Fred Holmes, and was the last person to see either man alive. This is the Hayfork Homicides. Joseph Bebeau, 71, and Fred Holmes, 60, were pioneers of the Hayfork Valley. They were found murdered on the morning of January 20th in their home on Salt Creek, 3 miles from the village of Hayfork. No one can divine the motive that would inspire anyone to kill the kindly old gentleman who had lived in Hayfork Valley for more than a quarter century and never made an enemy so far as anyone knew. Willie Vaughn was their nearest neighbor who lived a mile distant, and he went to the Bebeau place yesterday morning to get some blacksmithing done. Not seeing any signs of life about the place, he entered the farm home unbidden. Lying upon the floor, in pools of their own blood, he found Bebeau and Holmes. Upon the table between them lay $50 and $100 in silver. If the motive of the murderer was robbery, he had not taken all the money in sight. Having gathered only the rough outline of the greatest tragedy ever heard of in Trinity County, Vaughn rode to Hayfork to telephone the news to Weaverville and notify the officers. Owing to the disorganized condition of the telephone service, the word did not reach the county seat until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Sheriff Boyce and Deputy and Coroner Wallace left for Hayfork in less than half an hour and should have arrived there by midnight last night. Before leaving Weaverville, Sheriff Boyce telephoned to Hayfork, telling any citizen to arrest and hold until his arrival anyone against whom the least suspicion might be directed. It is believed here that the people of Hayfork have strong suspicions, if not evidence, against someone whose name they dare not breathe until the officers arrive. It was evident that the person telephoning for the sheriff kept back details. Bebeau, a Canadian Frenchman, arrived in Trinity County nearly 40 years ago. He was an industrious man and shrewd but honest moneymaker, and was reputed to be wealthy. He always had considerable ready money around him. He seldom drank, and was known as a kind old man. He was not married, and was so warmly attached to Fred Holmes that he had repeatedly said he would will all his property to his friend. Holmes came to Trinity County more than 25 years ago. He went to work for Bebeau, and had been in his employ ever since. They were partners in mining, and more or less jointly interested in the farm. Holmes was sober and always had money. He and Bebeau were never known to have any disagreements. Holmes was once married, but separated from his wife in Pennsylvania. He had a daughter living in that state. Both men were killed by small caliber bullets fired from a pistol or a rifle. Their own gun, a large caliber rifle, was found on the sidewall. They were shot down without being given the opportunity to defend themselves. It is thought probable that Holmes may have been settling with a member of his threshing crew when trouble arose and he and his partner were killed. Later, Dr. Taylor determined that both Joseph Bebeau and Fred Holmes were shot twice in the back with bullets fired from a .32 caliber gun. The bullets went through the bodies, and one of the leaden missiles even pierced the door. Bebeau was shot through the heart. Dr. Taylor says that he believes that Bebeau was the last man who was killed. He had got up from his bed when he was shot down. All 4 bullets were fired into the backs of the victims. Coroner Wallace is holding the inquest at Hayfork tonight. The inquest determined that the double killing occurred later than Saturday noon. Ed Vaughn, it appears, was at the Bebeau place at noon Saturday. Both men were alive and well then. It is more than probable that the double murder was committed Saturday night or Sunday. So what was the motive? No one was able to suggest a motive for this awful crime. Bebeau and Holmes were themselves as harmless as kittens. It is impossible to harbor the theory that they quarreled, since it has been determined that they were both shot in the back. Bebeau was an employer of a number of men. He runs a threshing machine in season and has a crew of 20 helpers. It has been suggested that he was settling up with one of these men. The money was on the table. A dispute arose. The helper quarreled with his employer. Then the shooting, etc. But why and how were Bebeau and Holmes both shot in the back? Shot twice, in fact. The theory has little to stand upon. No adequate motive can be found. But the old pioneers are dead, killed by the hands of someone unknown. Faint tracks are found, such as those that would be made by small rubber boots, the kind that would be worn by a woman. The tracks are faint because of the recent heavy rains that partially obliterated them. The weather, it seems, has no interest in justice. Is there a woman in the case? Were the pioneers killed by a woman prompted by revenge or jealousy? There is nothing for this theory to stand on but the reported faint tracks made by small feet. The murder remains an unsolved mystery. Whether it shall be unsolved forever depends upon the outcome of the investigation, and that investigation and its outcome is awaited with all eagerness in Weaverville, and yet it is not at all certain that it will result in solving the deepest, darkest murder mystery ever to blacken the pages of Trinity County's history. The bodies of Bebeau and Holmes are laid to rest in the very same grave at a funeral service attended by every man, woman, and child in the Weaverville area. The murder of these two bosom buddies remains an unsolved mystery. It appears that justice for Bebeau and Holmes will never be achieved. And then, 8 years later, justice, although tortuously slow, suddenly seems inexorable when the grand jury indicts for the murder of Bebeau and Holmes 2 men named Robert McKay and Joseph Chase, whose motive for the alleged murder of the Hayfork pioneers was the $8,000 in gold they apparently absconded with. I suppose that explains why the silver, $150 worth, was simply left lying on the table. Central to the case against McKay and Chase was the confession of self-proclaimed accessory one George Barker, who said that he received only $100 for his part in the murder after turning down $500 to do the killing. Barker admits that he was the one that showed both McKay and Chase the nighttime trail to the home of Bebeau and Holmes, thus enabling the murderers to do their dark and bloody deed. After confessing, and because he is so important to the prosecution, Barker is given certain liberties around the jail. One day, a guard is overseeing Barker as he writes out his confession. After Barker has written a page, that guard goes to lunch, and while the guard is at lunch, Barker roots through the guard's box, goes through his possessions, bizarrely finding there the guard's pistol, which Barker subsequently takes, puts into his mouth, and uses to blow out the back of his skull. Without the key witness, the indictments against McKay and Chase are thrown out, and justice for Bebeau and Holmes is forsaken forever. It is precisely moments like these that keep insomniacs like us awake. In memory of Bebeau and Holmes, this has been Kinda Murdery Insomniac, stories to stay awake by. I'm Zevon Odelberg. Good night.
Kinda Murdery Insomniac is created, researched, edited, produced, and hosted by Zevon Odelberg, with opening theme by Niall Madden and art by the Gin of Lang. Available now on all podcasting platforms. If you like the show, please subscribe, review, and tell your friends. You can find us on social media at Kinda Murdery or email